Hello and welcome back to the OB Podcast, the podcast where we talk about operating and the art of visual storytelling. Something a little different today. I was recently in London, England, and had the amazing luck of doing a Q&A for the ACO and the GTC there with Danny Bishop, who is an incredible operator. And thankfully it was recorded. So without further ado, here is that evening.
Lock it up, nice and quiet, and let's roll.
Rolling. Victor 30 Echo, take 2.
Hey, Margaret. Hey, Mark.
And camera set. And action.
I just want to personally thank Danny for being here because this is an amazing operator right here, by the way. Anybody who doesn't know him. Questions for me or for Danny?
I've got the first question.
Yes.
I think one of the things for me, being interviewed over the last couple of years, when you look back and talk about your career, it feels like it all happens really easily. And what was interesting for me is, obviously you didn't have any stuff from ER, but you jumped straight into the West Wing, and it's like you're like, oh yeah, so I was operating on ER, and then I'm just thinking to myself, hang on a minute, because I kept wanting to kind of jut in and say, yeah, but I remember obviously I was a kid, so don't be annoyed at me. I remember how big ER was as a kid. Like, it was huge. I remember all the posters because I grew up in Cornwall. I remember all the posters, and it was a big deal, ER. And I remember like the way it was shot, and I wasn't even a camera operator. And I just thought it's really interesting. Why don't we start with how did you end up on ER? Not I was an operator on ER. How did you get into the position where you're on a show that is gone global, worldwide? And I don't know, for all of you that I'm assuming you've all seen ER, but this is a show that took people like Quentin Tarantino and got him to direct one episode.
That's right.
Like, it was huge, and it's still like a trailblazer. I'll stop talking now and out of you, but I think how did you end up on it?
Okay, this is a long story, but you asked.
Keep it short.
No, it's not going to happen. So ER came on TV, and it was like nothing had anybody ever seen for Steadicam, and I was doing a cross-country bike ride with that gentleman right there from Los Angeles to New York City. That's B. Raza, my very good friend. And I don't know if you remember this, but there was in the motorhome we were in, there was a little TV, and it had an antenna made out of a coat rack. And there was this hospital show on, and I remember sort of watching it. It was going in and out, and it'd be like, well, it's moving, and is that Steadicam? And I was barely a Steadicam operator. Is that Steadicam? And it's like, oh, it's still going. And I was just blown away by it, but we were riding, and I didn't think about it. When I got back to LA, I found out somehow who the operator was, and using some sort of ancient messaging system on the computer, I texted, I don't even think you called it that, Guy B, who was the operator on that, doing the most unbelievable things in the world. And I texted him, and I was like, you don't know me? I'm nobody. What you're doing is groundbreaking. I can't believe it. And he contacted me back, and he said, what's going on? And I think I said something about Twizzlers, which is a candy that he thought was funny. And he goes, you should come by set and visit. And I was like, ah. So my friend Charles Pappard and I went into the Warner Brothers lot through the whole thing. I'd never been on a stage before. And we go in, and he comes over, and he's this short guy with these rock and roll pants. And he's like, hey, I'm Guy. We're doing a shot here. I just got to go do this quick shot. And they go and they do this shot that like is 5 minutes long, and nobody even thinks, I mean, it's just unbelievable. And I was like, that's amazing. And then a month or so later, he called me up and he goes, hey, can you cover me on a Friday? I'm going to go to a wedding. And I was like, huh? And he goes, I'm just going to be straight with you. I've called everybody and nobody is available. And I've talked to the DP, and it was only one camera. DP is going to do a camera. There's 2 Steadicam shots. They're like small walk and talks.
And have you been operating at this point?
I've been operating with a small O. Right. Let's put it that way. I was not up to this, but I'm like, yeah, I could. Oh, and he's like, they'll pay you. They're going to pay me. Like, yeah. And so I show up.
Did you have a rig?
I had a rig.
I
had an old rig, a Model 2, if you know where that is. But I showed up, and I think some people laughed at me or whatever. But I showed up, and I did my things, and I sat behind, and a DP operated a camera, and I'm like watching, and I was so excited, and I was like, this is phenomenal. This is unbelievable. And I remember it's going to be on TV sometime. I'm going to see it. And then he went to do Peacemaker, and I got a call to do the show, and I was like, I'm sorry, what's going on? And he called me up, and he goes, listen, you're not good, but I think you're going to get there. But you were more excited about this show than anyone, so I told them to call you. Are you interested in doing it? And I was like, are you kidding me? And so I told you this was a long story. And so I said, yeah, totally. I mean, and again, I'm A camera Steadicam, and I've only done day playing as a Steadicam operator. I did one bad movie as an A camera operator. I don't really know what I'm doing. And I show up, and I show up on the day an hour and a half early or something like that, because I don't know what I'm doing. I got my gear in the back of my Subaru, and I pull into the Warner Bros. Lot, and I'm like, yeah, I'm Dave Chameides, I'm here to do ER. I'm 25 years old. And they're like, we don't have your name. And I'm like, it's a CH. No, KH. Are there any names with Dave? ER and I'm not. And he goes, well, let me look at the call sheet. I'm not on the call sheet. Like the guy B's still on the call sheet. And this was before cell phones, so I'm literally sitting at the gate, and I'm again. I don't cry that often, but this was another time when I was about to cry, and I was just like, I can't. And finally, somehow, someone from the office was like, "Come on in." And I drive back to the back lot, and Terrence Nightingale, who some of you may know him, he's from England. He was assistant on the show, ended up being the operator on the show. He goes, "Come on, let's get your gear out, and you're doing the shot." And blah, blah, blah. And the first shot was a crane step off in a party, but the crane was a Hustler dolly with this rickety thing on, I mean, it was totally unsafe, on like 3 risers that was maybe a foot wide. But of course I'm late, and I'm like, yeah, we can do that. And so I went up there in the host and did the shot, and I didn't move my stuff onto the truck for 3 weeks because I just assumed every day I was getting fired. I mean, I was like, there's no way they're gonna hire me back, but they kept on hiring me back. And I'll tell you one final thing, and then I'll finish this, is there's glass all over because it's a hospital set, and I was shooting on a Friday. We were finishing up on a Friday, and on Saturday or Sunday, the DP and I were supposed to go to a wedding of a mutual friend, so I was going to see him on the weekend. And I was watching dailies, and I'm coming around the corner on the dolly, and there's a piece of glass, and there's me, and there's the dolly, and there's the focus puller, and there's the boom, fully in there. And so I'm like, I'm screwed. That's it. And I go to the wedding, and I was like, Richard, can I talk to you? He's like, yeah. He's got a beer. He's like, what's up? And I said, I was watching dailies, and I'm in the glass, and okay. And I was like, I mean, I think I may have even said, like, I know you got to get someone else. I'll get you some names. And he's like, Dave, nobody watches dailies. They'll cut around it. It's fine. Just have a beer. Be okay. And I was like, really? And he goes, yeah, you're the operator. Things happen. Move on. And I was like, oh, okay. And that was like when I was like, I'm the operator. And I stayed there for 3 years, and I could have stayed there for a lot more, but I decided it was time to move on. But while I was there, I got to direct an episode at 27, 28, I think. And I won an Emmy for a live show that we did, and it was the single greatest thing in my career.
Excuse me, can we turn the music off? Because this is being... Oh, it's outside, is it? Yeah. It's because it's going to go on there.
Oh, I thought it was in my head.
So I've got a question then, which is really interesting, because this is one of the questions I always get asked about my role as an A camera operator.
Okay, but you have to answer it after I answer.
My relationship with the director and the director of photography. If you get brought in early doors as a young operator like that, onto a huge show like ER,
yeah,
and you don't really know what you're doing, how do you circumnavigate that role? Not now as an experienced operator,
yeah,
but how do you know how much relationship you can have with the actors? How did you know how much you could talk to the director?
Yeah.
How did you know how much, that's a big thing 100%. To step in on.
Well, it's so there's 2 things about that. Terrence Nightingale, who I mentioned, was the focus puller, and literally, I'm talking day one. I'd go, so let's get the let's put the 25 on, and he'd go, and I go 21, and he go, yeah, 21, and I go, and give me the wheels, and he'd shake his head, a fluid head, yeah, fluid. He totally made sure that I didn't, that I made. I mean, he helped me beyond belief. I didn't know I really didn't know what I was doing, and I was making it up. So basically, I don't completely know the answer to it, but I think what I did was I was like, I'm just going to keep my head down and kind of be quiet and just listen a lot, and try to fix things if I can, try not to screw up too much, and slowly figure out who's who and whatever. But the thing about that show was, it was all overhead lighting because it was big Steadicam shots. So the one thing that I had going for me was I wasn't as good as Guy by any means, but I could move the Steadicam around. So they were like, well, I mean, I guess he's got to do something because nobody else knows how to do that.
Right,
here.
okay.
So at least I had that, I think. I think that helps you if you have a specialty. But I think a lot of it is just listening and trying not to screw up and slowly going, well, I mean, I'll ask you this because I think it's sort of the same thing. When you start a show now, you're an amazing operator who has an amazing career, but you start a show with someone you've never worked with, a director. I mean, there's sort of the kind of slow figuring out how much they want from you and how much they don't, right?
Yeah, I mean, everyone talks about having imposter syndrome, and I just, it doesn't go away. I don't think.
Nope.
I think that I think the way I look at it, stepping onto set, I'm just like, I'm still walk in and I'm like, look up at the stage, and I'm like, I can't believe I'm here, and it's like, I think that imposter syndrome just doesn't go away, and I think if it ever does go away, then maybe a little bit of the a bit of the sparkle's gone. I was lucky to go and work with Greg Fraser this week, and honestly, the night before I didn't go to sleep. You asked my wife, like all night long, I couldn't get to sleep. I woke up every hour. I got up really early, and I was like walking around the house, and I was like, right, I better go to work now. And I walked in, and I'd never met him in person before. I'd spoken to him in a Q&A, like shook his hand, and I was like, hi. And I think that imposter syndrome just doesn't ever go away. And I think every time you go and work with somebody new, whether you think you're more experienced than them or not, I think like you always feel like you're lucky to be there.
Yeah.
Because it's a creative job, and it's great to have a creative job. So I don't know how you walk that line. It just feels like it's an interesting anecdote from you that you just stepped onto ER because it was such a big show. That's like for me, it's like yes, like this week I'll tell you something I really struggled with going working with Greg. It's like they'd been shooting this film since May, and I'm going in on like week 20. And it's like they've got a style, they've got a rapport, which is very different to when you start on a film on day one.
That's true.
You all start on day one together. You're all working out the pace of the set, how you're all going to film, how you're going to approach things, and it's like that's the same. It's the same story, right? Going and working with Greg, or going in on year 3 of the biggest global show. Yeah, it's like that dynamic is never an easy one to work out, is it?
But I think that we just realized that you and I should never be 2 camera operators on the same show together, because it'd just be like puddles in the corner.
We don't know what we're doing.
Have him do it. I can't do it. But I will say, part of it, to their credit, the nicest cast I've ever worked with, and the nicest crew I've ever worked with. And I think that they probably knew that I wasn't up to it. Guy probably told them he's not there yet, but I think he brings a lot to it. And so I think they were very, I do remember there's one actor on the show named Abe Ben Ruby, who's this huge giant of a guy and lovely guy, and he's sort of a smaller character, so he would come and go. And I remember he was there on my first day, and I remember talking to him, because I remember very specifically because he's taller than I am, which doesn't happen a lot. I'm like, oh. And I talked to him, and he went off to do a movie, and he was gone for a month and a half. And then he came back, and he came in, and we're setting up a shot. And I'm like, all right, so let's bring the desk over here. We need to bring this over here. Give him a file. Let's bring something in here. And he looked at me, and he goes, ooh, someone grew up. And I went, huh? And he goes, yeah, I don't think I heard you talk when I started here. And I'm like, oh, really? And he goes, yeah, no, I mean, it's great. But, so at some point, obviously, I found my sea legs, but they required it of you. So I was lucky at the end of the day. I mean, that's the God's truth of it. So
lucky, but you pulled it out.
I pulled it, yeah, but they didn't realize.
Okay, so
questions from the audience?
Yeah, a question to Dave for some of the stuff that you spoke about.
No, and over here.
I think what you're asking is about how you move the camera if you don't have a Steadicam. What is a good way to move the camera?
Okay.
Any tips, Dave?
I mean, look. I'm the most non-technical operator you'll find, and there's sliders and there's dollies and there's cranes and there's all that stuff. But I mean, and this may be a cop-out, it's probably not answering your question, but I think what you need to do is to understand the story and know why the camera's moving, and then figure out what the piece of equipment, assuming you have everything at your disposal. And I think sometimes people go a little overboard with things, and it's just like, my favorite thing is like, do you guys call we call it a slider.
Slider, yeah.
Do you call it a slider here? Especially like newer operators, they'll get it on the slider, and it's like they're speed skaters at the Olympics, and it's like, it doesn't have to move. It can move, but it doesn't have to, so I think it's really about understanding what the movement says and then figuring out what it is. And you can do the same with Steadicam. It's like you can overdo it. So I don't know. I don't know if that answers it.
I think that I think that's the right answer, and what I would say is, I think that you always try and work out what is the best way to move the camera. If you don't have, if you don't have a crane, if you don't have a Steadicam, it's like how is the nicest way if I move the camera at all? Like I did a film in India, and we used a wheelchair for quite a lot of it, because you didn't want to see the footsteps when you were walking, but you wanted the camera to be tracking. So it's like, and now I know that there's a certain level of, there's a really good level in post where they can stabilize a shot.
Yeah.
So I wanted a handheld fill, but you can dial down the level of the handheld by being in a wheelchair and being pushed. So it's still got a floaty feel to it, but you're not seeing the side-to-side footsteps. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, but then you would do a rickshaw.
Yeah, I was in India, I didn't. Which is ironic.
Yeah. And
I had a
actual
wheelchair.
rickshaw. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just
Yeah.
asking, like, I'm thinking, like, why wouldn't you? And then, like, you...
It's just one of those things. It's like just like improvise. I think it is definitely about finding the. I think, and then ultimately, if you can't make it move in a way that you feel looks good, just don't move it at all.
I was
Come wider and let the action happen within the frame. And that's kind of like my go-to rule in my own head for my own sanity is if ever anything isn't working, I would just go wider, because if you go wider, the actors can move more freely in the frame and you move the camera less. And quite often I'll tie myself in knots, and then I just think, just go wider. and that really helps decide if you don't have the right tools. Sometimes that is just the best thing. Even if you end up doing like 4 or 5 steps in, if you're a little bit wider in post, you can stabilize it, and it can look really good.
There's a couple of things you said that sort of resonated, which is, I think it's not about, oh, we have a crane, so let's figure out a crane shot. It should be, what story is the camera telling, and now how can we best achieve that? And sometimes not having stuff makes you think very differently, and you come up with things you wouldn't have, which I always think is interesting. And also, I don't know about you, but I always find that any shot I'm ever doing, the more I simplify it, the better the shot gets. And the more complicated the shot is, it's not usually not as good. And I don't know why that is. And sometimes I'll find that if a shot's really complicated and I can do some massive move or something, I'll start to think about it. I'll go, you know what? I'm in the wrong place. I should be 4 feet over there, and then everything lines up. But sometimes you get so in the moment that you stop. And when I'm working with the dolly grip and assistant that I like to work with, they'll sometimes pull me out of it and go, what are you doing? Why aren't we just over there? And I'm like, we should be, so I don't know if there's any perfect answer.
I mean, I think I told you this when you interviewed me. It's like on Star Wars, the key grip and the DOP had designed this shot without me, and I don't know where I was, but I turned up on like a Tuesday morning, and we had a Technicrane, and they were like, yeah, so we're going to play this in 1 on the Technicrane, and I was like, what? Like, I know when I can make it work and when I can't make it work, and I was like, this is going to be really tough.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, because there'd be certain situations where you're having to pan against the crane moving in and out. And we started doing it, and this is the problem when you work on like American shows, is there's like 15 people looking at the monitor that you don't know who they are, and basically they're like, we're doing the shot and it didn't work, and about an hour into it, I just went over to the DOP and was like, this is never going to work. It's got nothing to do with my operating. I just need to do it in 3 shots. I'll put the camera there, and the camera there, and I'll get you everything that you're trying to get. Because I knew they were going to cut it anyway. And I was just like, just let me do that and I will get it. And then we won't be tying ourselves into this. And I was like, my mouth was dry. And he was like, okay. And then we did it. And it's like, why, you know, and I think that's the same thing, right? It's like, how do you decide how to move the camera? And sometimes you just have to simplify it. It's a really good mantra. It's like when you can't work out how to make it move well, just take a step back, have a moment to think, slow down and go, right, how do I do it so it looks great? Sometimes it's go wider and sometimes it's not move it at all. And that is definitely, even now, how I approach every shot. Is like, do I need to move it?
Further to that, do you ever have directors who have very strong ideas about a shot that they want, and you know straight away that it's not going to work? And do you ever acquiesce to their demands? Well, I assume you always acquiesce to their demands. Is there ever a time that you don't because you just know ahead of time this is not going to work?
Okay, so the question is, do you ever have a director who's got such a strong vision, and you're stood there and you're thinking, this isn't going to work, and what do you do? Do you do it or do you not do it? How do you approach that, Dave?
Thank you very much. That's why Danny's a great operator. Yeah, well, first of all, the answer is yes. I mean, because James Samuels, who I mentioned, The Harder They Fall, had every image in his mind. The thing that I loved about him was he was willing to throw it out if something else came along that was better. He was open to that. Those are the best directors. Because to me, what I want from my director is that they have a plan and that they're willing to punt if the scene changes, the actors do something, you know, that they're open to it. But to your point, this is the shot I want, and just the physics of it maybe don't even work. You're probably fighting a losing battle if you start with, that doesn't work. So, you know, they go, we're gonna come here, we're gonna pull across the road and this and that and the other, and you're like, oh, that's so great. I love this shot. I love this. Pulling back here is so great. And you know what? We may have a problem with the cars coming through here. So could we be on a little longer lens and start here? And then we get that pullback. So basically you become this massive cheerleader to try to give them what they want within the physics of what you do. I mean, backing up a little bit, but it's sort of the same as this. My favorite is you come in and you're like, why are we on the zebra crane? And I've never heard of a zebra crane. And who owns the zebra crane? And they're like, well, the key group and the DP own it. And it was like, so now we have to do this shot that doesn't work on some piece of equipment I've never heard of. And it's like, oh, great. But these things happen. And so you have to start finessing it. And the reality is sometimes, and you've probably been there, if you pitch, you know, you soft pitch, and no, I want the shot, and you go, okay, I'm assuming, by the way, there's not a safety issue. That's a whole nother thing. If there's a safety issue, you go, I can't do this. It's putting these people, but if it's just not going to work, sometimes you have to go down that road, and the dolly grip is going, you know this shot doesn't work, right? And you're like, yeah, I do, but we got to show it to them unless you can figure. So sometimes you actually have to show it to them, and they're like, why can't we? And you're like, well, because the building's there. And unfortunately, you have to take it on the chin sometimes there, because you can't say, I told you so.
When those shots make it into the final film, does that ruin your enjoyment of the film?
It's unfortunate. I mean, what I will say is, on a larger picture, I don't want to use the word control, but I try to have input into making something successful as much as I can. And there's sometimes you come up against something where it's out of your hands. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, if a director is so locked into something, and I've been on things where I've been doing something and the actor's like, why are you over here? That I'm over there doing my soliloquy, and I'm like, this is what they want. Look, I'd love to look at you over there, but maybe you should talk to him. Sometimes you have to do what they want, and you have to realize that it's not, you lost that one.
Yeah, I think that ultimately that you're there to complement the director, right? And I mean, there are so many stories that I could tell you where I just stand there and I hang my head, and I'm like, even in recent times with directors that I can't really name, but I'm stood there and it's really tense and everyone's angry because you're going over and you're blocking a shot, and you just think this is never going to work, and you're not even allowed to talk because the set's like in lockdown because everyone's so stressed, and you just want to go over, and it's like, even if you raise your hand, everyone's going to be like, shh, like that. So then you're stood there going for the shot, and you're thinking, I know it's not going to work, and it's like, and then it's like, cut, it doesn't work, and it's like, well, I know, like, you know. So it's like, that never goes away, and that's not that you're not good at your job. It's like there is a pecking order, and that is the director of photography and the operator, and it's like you can't override those two people. And some people you can have this amazing relationship with where you work like in sync, and then other times you've just got to take it on the chin.
Yeah.
And one time when I've had a conversation, I was really struggling on Sherlock, and I went up to the director in about I spoke to the director of photography first, and then I texted the director, and I met them for breakfast, and we walked outside together, and I basically said to the director with a huge like lump in my throat, looking at the ground, like basically telling him he was like tying my hands behind my back, and if he wanted me, he'd interviewed me and given me the job, and I said to him, if you want me to come here and operate for you and give you what you're asking me to give you, you need to give me a certain level of freedom, and if you afford me that freedom, I will do what you want in the time frame. But the way that it's running at the moment, we're not making the day. I'm not doing it for what you want. So can we work together? And he wasn't annoyed at me. I think that he respected the fact that I'd gone up to him and said, look, this is how I feel about it. And after that, it was stupid things like we'd be setting track up, and the first AD would run in and go, hey, Danny's moved the track a foot. And it's like, yeah, I've moved the track a foot because there was a pot plant coming out of Sherlock's head. Like, I haven't done it for my own personal gain. I've done it to make the film better.
Yeah.
And ultimately, sometimes it doesn't work, is the honest answer. Sometimes that dynamic doesn't work, and sometimes it's a real cluster, and it's not always perfect, and you kind of have to muddle through it. And I think that's filmmaking, and it can be really frustrating. But ultimately, I think that's, especially as you get older, like us two stood up here, is that you start wheedling out those people. And I've got directors that call me that I won't work for, and they call me and I'm like, nope. It's like, I don't want to work for you, because I want to go and work with people that want to be collaborative, because ultimately everybody is trying to make the film better, from the runner to the operator to the boom man or woman, and it's like it's a collaboration, isn't it? And it's like, I think it can be really frustrating in that situation. Basically, there is no right answer.
The thing that I would add to that is, and Danny sort of gave a great example of it. I've had situations where I've gone up to a director on like the third or fourth day, because usually there's like a little like figuring out and all that, and I've gone up and go, I feel like you're frustrated with me, and I don't want you to be frustrated with me. All I want to do is take what you're giving me and make it better. I don't want to change anything. I'm just trying to constantly make it better. So what can I do, or what am I doing that? And sometimes you have to be very careful, because sometimes they'll go, no, everything's fine, and it's not. And then you go, okay, we're going to play this game and that. But sometimes, and I've had directors go, you know what? Yeah, I'll be perfectly honest. Sometimes you're not giving me enough time to like figure it out in my head. And if you could just hold back a little, I know you're trying to help, and I love what you're giving, but I just need a little more time. It takes me more, you can see it faster or whatever, I don't remember what. But so I think at the end of the day, if you're honest with them, you're either going to get the person who can't deal with honesty, in which case you're screwed anyway, or they're going to go, no, I respect the fact that you're being honest with me. But the larger picture is, as I said, I don't view it that my job is to do everything successfully, because sometimes you can't. I view my job as whatever I'm given, I want to make it better. And sometimes that's knocking it out of the park, and sometimes that's just taking it and making it better. And if I've done that, and that's all I can do, then I've done my job. But sometimes it's tough, and if you have those directors, there's no work in the United States, so feel free to throw my name. Because I'll go, that Danny's horrible, but I will do what you need.
I think it's an age thing. Like,
is it an age thing? I think a 20-year-old kid saying what we're talking about is probably not going to be taken as well as maybe someone who. It's not. I don't think it's an age thing as it's having a catalog of experience where they go, oh well, you've done some things, so maybe I should. But then there are people who won't listen.
Yeah.
There's no question about it.
How do you approach collaboration with the DP specifically?
So the question is, how do you approach a collaboration with a DP specifically?
Don't look at. Why are you looking at me?
It's your night.
No, it's not.
No one wants to hear my
I don't
voice.
think. Look, there's no answer to that, because every DP is different. But in pre-production, hopefully, I'll have discussions with them, and I'll sort of find out how much they want. And my thing is, like on day one, it's not even the DP, it's the DP and the director and anyone. I'll usually be very surgical about it. On day one, I'll go in there, oh, what do you want? You want from here to here? Okay, let me, blah, blah. And then what I'll usually do is I'll sort of lob a softball out there and be like, hey, you think, should we throw an extra 4 feet on here? Maybe get a little wider back there? And something really innocuous, just to see if they're open to ideas. And then slowly over the first couple of days, you're sort of figuring out how much they want and how much they don't want. And I think most of it has to do with how comfortable a DP is with themselves. So there's some DPs I work with who they'll go, hey, put track from here to here, and they'll walk away and I'll be like, we're not doing that, we're putting it over here. And they'll come back and look, oh, that's great, this is good. And as long as I haven't messed with the lighting or whatever. And then there's some who want exactly what they want. And then there's all in the middle. I'm in two amazing DPs who are very different. John Lindley, who I've worked with forever, we joke the fact that he's never asked me a question. He gives me statements and they go up at the end. He goes, you think we should be on a longer lens? And it's like, he's not asking me whether we should be on a longer lens. He wants to be on a longer lens. But then there's Bill Pope, who I just finished working with, who wants everything the way that he wants it, unless you can interpret what he wants and do it a different way and give it to him, in which case that's the way he wants it and you have to figure it out. So I don't think there's any answer to that, is the sad answer to that.
I think my personal approach, especially because I've obviously done a lot of interviews in the last couple of years and had to think about it, I think my personal approach is I really think about time management, and I completely see my role on set with the cinematographer about buying them time, and because I know that it's so important, the look of the film, for my department and for everybody's department. And I go into my working day, I arrive early, and from the first take, all I'm thinking about is how do I buy time? How do I give them the time to light? How do I give them the time to rehearse? How do I move the camera? And ultimately, the most important thing is you get the camera up straight away so that they've got something to light to. Maybe not back in the film days, but in the digital days, people want to look at the monitor and they want a frame. So before I've even started thinking about it, I put the camera up on a set of legs, even if I know I'm going to be on a crane, and the camera's pointing in the direction of where we're filming. And from that moment on till our very first take, I'm like, is the honey wagon going to be in shot? Is makeup going to be in shot? Do we need to move Video Village? And I think that's the way I approach my role with the cinematographer before I start looking at the creative side. And then once I've done all of those things, I start thinking about how I rehearse it, and ultimately what I'm doing then is I'm buying myself time, because the floor is clear, and then I can start rehearsing the move. Because if the floor isn't clear, you can't even start looking at your moves, even if it's handheld or even if it's a static frame, you can't start looking at that. So I think like that's the biggest thing that I've learned about myself in the last 2 years, is that that is what I'm conscious of, is buying the DAP time, and they will thank you for it.
And I think that all these things are specific instances of the reality of you're trying to, if you're not a DP you've worked with, obviously, you're trying to right off the bat let them know I'm an asset to you and I'm there to protect you and give you the best you can give. And so there are literally sometimes on day one where I know that the DP wants to see, like the move or something like that, and I'll literally out loud go, hey, can we just clear everything so I can show our DP the move so he can start lighting or she can start lighting or whatever. And I'll say it out loud so that they hear that I'm going, I need it. So, and anytime you can go up and go, hey, I just want to let you know the AD just said that we're not going to do that next shot, and we're probably turning around after that. I don't know if you heard it, but I wanted to let you know. Suddenly they're going, okay, this person's out there, they're on my team, and yeah.
Did you casually mention that you directed an episode of VR?
Did I casually
Emmy Award-winning
mention that I directed an episode of VR?
Tell me how that opportunity.
I believe I casually mentioned that. Yes.
Was that the live one?
Oh God, no! It was not the live one. Tommy Shalami directed the live one, but I was one of the 2 lead camera operators on that. And I will say this: I'm glad the internet didn't exist, because they brought in these other live camera operators, and I could not Google them. And had I Googled them, I would have found out these are the best live camera operators in the entire world, and I just thought they were these guys who did the Emmys or whatever, and so I wasn't as over, but they held my hand through the whole process. That's a whole nother story. So Jonathan Kaplan was a great director who came into ER and ended up being a producer, and one of the things that I used to do on ER was I sort of had the keys to the stage, and I would always, and so for people who don't know, nobody had ever done Steadicam like we did on ER on television before and used it the way it had been used. So some directors would come in and they'd honestly be a little overwhelmed. So I would say to them, because I enjoyed doing it, hey, if you're coming on the weekend and you're blocking, if you'd like me to come in with the Steadicam or without the Steadicam, I can run around with you and sort of give you an idea of what we're capable of. And almost everybody took me up on it, and I loved it because I learned a lot. And Jonathan and I were in there, and we hit it off. And after we were done, this was it's my second season, season 4, and he said, well, when are you directing? And I was like, and he goes, no. He goes, what's that?
How old were you this stage?
I was 20, 27, 28. I think my voice had just changed. And excuse me. And he said, well, you direct the show anyway. And I was like, I don't direct the show. And he goes, you're in there talking to the actors, you know what? He said, I'll ask him. And I was like, yeah. And he went upstairs and he said, why isn't this kid directing an episode? And excuse me. They came back after season 4 and they said, in season 5, we're going to give you an episode. And I was like, I don't understand. And they said, but you gotta go out and make something so we can so I went out and I made this music video. But I will tell you, I went to the actors and I said, look, I can do most of this stuff in my sleep. I can't do it well, but I can do most of it. But I said, I don't really understand what you all do. And Eric LaSalle said, I got you, and he's a friend of mine, and he called up this woman named Ivana Chubbuck, who is a very famous acting instructor, and got me into her class all summer long, and I took acting lessons, and I was horrible. But it gave me an appreciation for speaking to actors, at least on some level, so that when I went in there, I and the reality is, I went in and I directed an episode, and it was good. I mean, wasn't terrible, and everybody wanted me to succeed. And I could have directed more had I stayed, but I had already made the decision to move on to greener pastures, but I ended up directing other episodes as well. And then the truth of the matter is, I came home one day and I was like, I don't like this. I like being an operator. And my wife was like, why? And she goes, because everybody thinks they can do your job better than you can, but when I'm in a Steadicam, nobody's telling me what to do. And I go home and nobody calls me, and it's great. So yeah, I have here, thank you. Yeah, so that's how I nonchalantly direct. I didn't mean to, whatever, but it's, yeah.
Next question. Are you ever in the situation where the director and the director of photography don't want the same thing, and the director takes you one way and the DOP takes the other way, and what do you do in that situation? What do you do when they don't get on?
This has never happened in the history of filmmaking. I just want to say, but if it did, it's funny you said this, because on my podcast, this is something I ask almost every camera operator, and I think I asked you, and everybody laughs. There's no set answer to this, but the reality is, if you can, you find something that complements both of them. If you're just tired of it, you get off the dolly and you go, you two need to come over here and talk to each other. We need to come up with one shot, because I don't know what you want, and I'm really sorry, but I don't know what to do. And then I was talking to maybe Des Whelan the other day, and I think it was Des, but one of the operators here, and he said, I just do my own shot. I was like, huh? And he goes, well, if they're not going to decide, I'll just do something. And then they'll go, well, that's not what either of us want. And it's like, well, then let's come up with what you want. So yeah, that's a really, really tough situation to be in. Danny?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think I actually don't know. I don't really know what to say, because it is a nightmare, basically. It's an absolute nightmare. And it's not an easy way to fight your way out of, and ultimately, and I'll probably get shot for saying it. I answer to the director, and it's like, and and I have been in that situation, and I've just gone, well, that's, you know, I see the director of photography as my boss, but I answer to the director, and I'll like get shot on the hill for saying that, but that is ultimately what you have to do. And there are situations when it's been an absolute nightmare, and it isn't easy, and I was thinking to myself when I was away this year about all the times I've been interviewed in the last few years, thinking about how easy it is to sit up here and give answers, and actually the reality is when you're filming it isn't easy, and sometimes it doesn't work, and sometimes you don't get on with people, and it's horrible, and you go home from work at the end of the day and you think, oh my god, and you just hope that those days are the small amount, they're in the minority, and the majority are the other days where you have a lot of fun and you go home feeling creative, and hopefully you get to wheedle out those people. But yeah, that was a long-winded answer of saying there's not a right way. You've just got to do the best you can.
It's a losing battle.
It's a losing battle.
It's a losing battle. I mean, I will say, I'm thinking of one particular situation. This is being recorded, by the way, and for anybody listening, if a director wants to hire me, I will always go with the director. But if a DP wants to hire me, I will always go with the DP. So I just want to throw that out there. That's just
me too.
That's just because there's no work in the United States.
Yeah.
But usually what I'll do is I'll go up to the director of photography, honestly, and I'll go, hey, assuming I have a good relationship with him, I don't know what to do because he's telling me to do the exact opposite of what, you know, so you want me to go his direction, you want me to go your direction, what do you want? And hopefully they'll go, you gotta be kidding me, just do what they want. You know what I'm saying? It's like, hopefully they'll be the bigger person, but that can backfire on you as well. I mean, it's gonna suck, it's just what it is, and it's just like, it's petty and it's stupid, but I will say that what this brings up is, I would say 95% of our job is interpersonal skills, and then there's the panning and the tilting that comes in occasionally at the end. I mean, it really is, because you're constantly, all you're doing from the moment that you arrive is you're reading the room and trying to figure out who needs what and who doesn't need what. And that actor wants to be talked to all the time, and that actor doesn't want to know that I exist. Which, by the way, just on a side note, I was talking to Brad Whitford, the guy who in The West Wing, and we were talking about method actors. And he goes, I always want to go up to the method actor in the 1800s Western and go, how do you explain the camera on the dolly over there and the two guys behind it with the phones? Like, what do you do with that? Yeah. And I thought, that's pretty good, actually. I like that. Anyway, that's a side note.
What about the editing? Do you have any relationship? You go to the edit afterwards as much as you learn the acting? Do you learn anything from the editing afterwards?
Yeah, so the question was, do we go into the editing at all, and are we have anything to do with the editing? But you also said something else, do we learn from the editing? I will say I don't generally go to editing because
I don't either.
You're shooting. I mean, it would actually be fun, and I've done it. I have done it in the past just to understand it better. But I will say that when we're rehearsing and they come up with, a master or this or the other, I'm constantly thinking about what I think the edit is to make sure that we're not missing a piece. And some of the shows that I've done where I'm really thankful for is I'll get a call a week in from the editor going, hey, we just want to let you know, like, we love the fact that you're giving us so, not so much stuff, but like the right pieces and whatever. That always makes me feel good. It doesn't happen, but like, you know what you're doing.
I think the key thing is you have to see the edit as you go along. I think that it can really change your view about the show that you're working on. Because you ultimately, I find that I'm so invested in one shot at a time, and I even though I'm looking at a scene and I understand the scene, I get so invested in one shot that I forget that it's going to cut together, and then when I see it cut together, I'm like, so that's why she went out that door and came in that door, and it's like, I think seeing the edit is just such a fantastic thing when you're shooting. I'm not talking about like seeing rushes. I'm saying, like, the following week, to get the last week, if they've done the edit, is to actually sit and watch it because you go, right, okay, and you can kind of learn that your own style within the melee of the film that you're making. And on last year when we did Star Wars, I kept thinking I was going to get fired every day because it was so tricky, and I'd go home, like, it's interesting what Dave said about thinking about it later. I was going home in the car, driving home on the M3 every night, thinking, I fucked up the end of that shot, and then I was like, I fucked up the end of that shot, and then when I watched it cut together, I was like, they're not even on that bit.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you forget as an operator, because you're so invested in every single shot, because you want the beginning to be good and the end to be good. And then when you watch it in the edit, they're not even on the beginning and they're not even on the end. And sometimes they cut the middle out.
Yeah.
So it does really help on anything. And quite often, if I know the director well enough, I say, hey, why don't you cut together like a sizzle reel and show the crew halfway through?
Yep.
Because that reinvests the crew. Because everybody's working like on a 10-week shoot at week 5. If you sit and watch 10 minutes, everyone's like, oh yeah, right, fuck, that's what it looks like. So I think that side of the editing is brilliant. But in terms of sitting and watching the edit, never go to the edit suite. Never, like, even afterwards, it just magically gets edited together by somebody more important than me.
Anyone else?
Tony.
Guys, can you talk more about working with other departments to control the chaos on set?
Working with other departments and controlling the chaos on set. Danny?
Working with other departments is obviously really important. I think I will hold my hands up and say, in the beginning, I was very naive to thinking that being the camera is like you're the most important person on set. And I think as you get older and greyer, you realise that everybody is absolutely integral, and like the moment that you have that understanding of everybody being integral, that's when filmmaking becomes really fun. And I've gone through this whole arc in my career of thinking the focus puller was the most important person to me on set, and then the grip was the most important. And now I'm at the stage in my career where I think the standby art director is, because when I go onto a job, I'll find out who that person is on the tech recce's, and I'll go up and introduce myself, and that's the first person I find now. And then I always say, hey, you know, when we're on set, just come and stand next to me. And if I'm operating, look over my shoulder. If I'm on the camera, look, I always have a monitor on the camera. You can just be next to me all the time. And I think for me as an operator, that is the most important person, because I constantly fiddle with the frame, constantly move stuff around. I'm always trying to find the best frame, and now I realise that all the people that I thought were important to me, like the grip and the focus puller, you know they're going to be good at their job, and the standby art director helps me really build what we're all trying to look at. So as an operator, that's who I've chosen to work with the most. And then I heard Dev say when he was stood up, is like, ultimately working with all the departments, you just got to be nice to people. And there's a lot of operators that are not nice. And it's like, and if you want people to move like a 10-gallon barrel, if you're nice to them, you'll get all the riggers will run in and help you. And if you're not nice to them, they don't do that. And I think that's the key, is constantly being nice to people. And I find if I'm not getting on with someone, I will kill them with kindness. I will go out of my way to be nice to them, to the point where it will annoy them. Because then they cannot do anything but go, oh fuck, I'll move it for you.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to respecting people's jobs and knowing everybody wants to do their job well, and just like you want to do your job well to make the DP and the director work well, and they all want to do their job well, and there is a little bit of a battle, because the reality is, like, a camera Steadicam, right? Everybody's looking at you going, oh, this is cool, and you're the center of it and whatever, but you're just juggling all the other things that are going on, and you've got a little more responsibility, or more so people are going to like point at you if something goes wrong, but everybody still has to do their job. And the other thing I think that I realize is, you know, that I don't know what it would. No, I mean, I really think that all of them are important, obviously, and I respect all of them. But I do realize I can't do any of their jobs as well as they can. So they are as important as I am, because if it's a period piece and I nail the shot, but you know, Hanes' underwear is showing out of the back because the wardrobe person hasn't been given time to do their job, that shot doesn't work. You know, I mean, and I'll give you a very minor example, but I was on a show and we had 2 trainees, and one was just Johnny on the spot every minute, and the other one, it was like the 15th hour, which is what we do in the United States, And I looked over at him and I go, hey, can you do me a favor and get me a cup of coffee? And he went, and he walked away and he came back and he kind of hustled at me. And I said, look, I'm going to be blunt with you, just so you know. I said, you're kind of pissing me off right now. And I get it, because you didn't get in this business to get me coffee. But first of all, as a trainee, your job is to be around to do whatever we need, and that's what I need right now. But what I want you to realize is at this moment, when I'm falling asleep and I have an 8-point techno crane shot that I'm trying to bring all this in, you getting me coffee is one of the most important things happening on this set, because it's going to allow me to get through this. So I know it seems demeaning, but it really isn't. And I said to him, and now that I've said that to you, please go stand over there. But if you had gone, totally, let me bring it in, and brought it into me, I would have said, put on headsets and stand next to me and you can watch the shot with me. But I'm not going to do that now because I'm a little pissed off at you. So in the future, know that your job right now, part of it is to get me coffee. And that's not because I'm better than you, but that's because I have more experience. And someday you're going to be here, hopefully, and you'll ask someone else to get you coffee, and then they'll get it, and you'll put them on headsets and let them listen. So that's how this works. But really right now, your job is super important, because that's what I need. And it doesn't mean I'm better or whatever. It's just that's kind of where it is. As far as the chaos, depends on the show. Like there's some shows where it's just constant chaos, and I'll take the AD aside and go, dude, we gotta do something here, because I'm screaming and you're screaming. We all have to get. And so I'll step in and try to help it. But I think part of that is also giving people the time that they need to do things, and I think the chaos arises because no one's given the time. And so sometimes you have to be the adult to stand in and go, let's just all calm down for 2 seconds. We're going to get this. You go do your thing, you go do it, because nobody else is doing it. Hopefully you have a good AD who's doing that. You don't have to do that, but it's just, yeah.
Next question.
So you're very reliant on other people. Like, for example, you spend a lot of time going backwards.
Yes.
You've got someone bashing for you, right? You've got your career, you've got your focus pillar. So you need to trust them. So how does it work? Are these bits? Do you just show up on a gig and they've already hired the focus pillar and they've already hired your grip? Or do you get to call up and say, I need this guy because I need to trust the person who's going to be guiding me backwards?
Yeah.
And know that I'm not going to,
Sure.
go down flight of steps, or focus pillars just, you're not in tune with the focus pillar and you're not going to get the shot. So do you get any say in that, or is that all do you just show up and go, that guy looks cool, I'm going to grab him?
No, so the question was specifically Steadicam, but really across the board. I mean, it doesn't make too much. Is you're reliant on so many people, but speaking of Steadicam, like a grip who's on my back, or even a grip who's pushing the dolly to get the shot, and a focus puller, do we get much say in that? Look, ideally, absolutely. I always want my dolly grip and my assistant. But number one, you fall out of sync sometimes and you can't, so you have a number of people. And sometimes you'll come on a show late, or sometimes one of the things, I don't know if it works here, but the key grip will have to go, well, I really like our dolly grip. And it's just like, yeah, but I have a relationship with my dolly grip, and it's a little bit of a dance. So you're always trying to get the people that you don't even, by the way, to me, it's not even trust, because if I get on a show and I'm meeting someone, I've already IMDb'd them. I've probably called up Danny and gone, hey, I see you work with this guy. What do I need to know? How is it, or this woman, and sort of done that. And then I'll sort of start to figure out myself. But you can usually tell. But it's not even trust. It's more, if I have my dolly grip, I know what they know, and they know me, and they know what I like to do and how. So we're way ahead of the game, and everything's faster and better right off the bat. So for those reasons, I'd rather have them. And then as far as a grip on my back when I'm backing up with Steadicam, I'll know pretty quickly whether they're on top of it or not. And if it's something that's actually dangerous, I'll specifically talk about what I need. But if it's just walking backwards and they need to keep people out of the way, I won't even say anything, because I'll assume at this point they know what they're doing. And if we keep hitting people, I'll go up to the key grip and go, I got to get someone else in here because it's not working. Danny?
Crikey, so different over here. I mean, it's like I don't know, it's, you don't always get the people you want, is the honest answer. Especially because we have regional things. And then obviously I've done a lot of work abroad, and you don't always get the right people. And I think you just have to be aware of, ultimately what's come out of the last 10 years is safety first. You want to make sure that everything's safe, and ultimately going downstairs with a rig on, you could really hurt yourself, or being there with cars or anything like that. And I think it's ultimately you always want people that you work with around you. I think when you're trying to get into, especially when you're trying to get into features, you think there's this whole world that like you can't get into because everybody always works together, and you think, how do I crack into that? And then what you realize once you're in it is you realize that the reason they all work together is because they've got that language together to work together. Not only is it fast, but also because they have an understanding of how you work, and you want to take that onto your next job. And then it is an absolute nightmare when you work with people that you don't know, not because they're not good, but because you don't have that rapport or that language where you can second guess each other. And then obviously you sometimes work with people that are just terrible, and then you're suddenly I was aware, like, because I've just been in China for 4 months, and I was working with local crew there, and you realize when you're used to working with people how much you don't think about things. You're like, I need the camera to get from here to there, and I'm going to do it like that, and I'll operate it. And then you don't think about what they go away and think about in order to facilitate you, in the same way as the DOP doesn't think about what you're doing. But then suddenly when you're working with people who maybe aren't as experienced, not that they're not good, they're just not as experienced, suddenly I was having to put my thinking hat on, going back like 12 years in my career, to start thinking about things that I don't think about, that I don't feel that I need to think about anymore. And then I'm like, why is the camera doing that thing where the crane's going right, but I'm having to pan that way? Why because a good crane grip will do that for you and work that out for you. I mean, that's like a big example, but it's the same thing for safety. It's the same thing for Steadicam, isn't it? It's like they think about things that you don't think about anymore.
Well, and what I would say is, like, you'll do some big crane shot and you're like, I am really good, and then you realize I'm not really good. He's really good, or she's really good, and I'm just sort of along for the ride.
Yeah.
But I will say that to that point, let's say I show up and I haven't worked with someone before, specifically the dolly grip. If we have a shot from here to there, and I'll sort of go, okay, this is A, and we're on a 35 millimeter, and I need to see that. We need to push into B and whatever. And I'll know exactly, or with a crane, the cranes are all about where the base is. I'll figure out what the shot is, and I'll go quietly to myself, base should be over there, we'll swing out over here, and we'll do this. And then I'll go to the dolly grip, and I'll go, hey, so the shot starts, instead of saying I want the base there, I'll say the shot starts here, and then is gonna be up there. And what do you think the base should be? What do you think? Relying on their expertise to see, and I'm testing them, to see whether they're in the same line that I am. And if they go, oh, well, it's got to be over there, because otherwise you're going to have a bad arc if you go over here, then right off the bat I'm like, okay, so you know what's going on. Now, if they say the base should be over here, I won't counteract it, but I'll say, okay, I was feeling it should be over there because the line is over here, but you're saying over here. And they may go, yeah, but there's a tree there and I can't get past the tree with the bucket, so I could bring and give me three. So there might be another reason. Or I may realize, like, okay, you don't know where that is, so from now on I'm gonna go, I need the base over there, and just do it. So there's like a testing sort of push and pull period to figure out where. And I also tend to not go, give me track, give me boards. I go, what do you think we should do, and see what they feel, and I might step in and change that, but you're finding out. And the same thing with the AC. So it's a constant push and pull. But I will say this. I interviewed Tommy Shalami, who I mentioned before, a great director, and he said something which I totally agree with, is I don't want to work with 100 technicians on set. I want to work with 100 storytellers. And I want every single person to be a storyteller. And to me, I will take a focus puller who doesn't hit every single mark but understands exactly why they're doing what they're doing, over someone who's technically excellent but has no clue why they're going from one to the other. Or a dolly grip, the big thing is, I don't care if you can go from A to B. You need to understand why you're going from A to B, and that's the story. And luckily my dolly grip knows both, and I don't generally tell him. I just go, when she starts talking, just push it, and he'll hit it every time. Because and be watching the scene, by the way, and be watching the frame and make exactly the right, because he's a storyteller. So yeah, that's I mean, everything to me comes back to storytelling, because if you don't understand the story, you're just not gonna do it.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I've worked the last few years with a grip, who is an amazing storyteller, and like when we were in China and we were on like the 14th hour and my brain was absolutely fried, I would be like, I'm not quite sure how to do this, and he would be like, let's just do it like this, and I'm like, okay. And I on more than one occasion I can honestly say to him, I can't work out what you're saying, but just do it, and I'll operate it, because I was so tired, because we were doing split days and working 6-day weeks, and I was just like, okay, just do it and I'll operate it, and let's make it work. And if you're telling me that it's going to do what we're saying it is, and that is that fundamental thing about working with people that you work with, even from like the beginning of your career to like when you've been working for 20 years, it's like that's what you want, is you want people that have got your back.
Yep.
And it works all the way up the scale. You've got the back of the director of photography, who's got the back of the director, and that's what you're hoping across the whole board of the set.
Yeah, I've had things with my dolly grip Steve where I've been loopy and I've gone, I can't even follow you, and he goes, do me a favor, go sit somewhere else and let me set this up, and then we're going to do it and it's going to be great. And I look at him and I go, you realize I'm never going to work with you again if this doesn't work? And he goes, yeah, I'm not going to work with you again either, so we're okay. And he goes, just go over there and it'll be fine, I'll call you in a couple minutes. And I trust him enough.
Guy always says to me, go and have a cup of tea, and I don't drink tea.
There you go.
He always goes, go and have a cup of tea, I'll get it sorted, and I'm like, I don't fucking drink tea.
Yeah, exactly. But but that's the thing, is everybody picks each other up. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Were there any points where you thought you can't like do this job, and if so, who or what will be back naturally?
Say the second part again. I didn't.
Have you ever been through like a point where like the job's hard and everything's hard, I don't have time for like the rest of my life? That jazz. Like these thoughts everyone has.
Every day.
Like,
Yeah. Do you ever have points where the job is hard and it's like, I don't have time for the rest of my life? Look, no, there's all the time. I will tell you, it depends on the person. It depends on your life. In a joking sort of way, if you're working on a TV show, the worst thing in the world is to get a director who's going through a divorce, because they do not want to leave set. And you're like, dude, I have no problem with what's going on in your personal life, but I want to go home. So, if you have little kids, it is really tough. And one of the things that I mean, this segues a little bit, but I think sometimes you get into this thing of, I'm irreplaceable. Like, they need me here. And it's like, no, your family actually needs you here, so take Friday off. And what'll end up happening is you'll come back on Monday and it'll be like, all right, let's go, and we're doing this, and you'll be that much more. So I think you have to be cognizant of that. And what brings you back into it, like, well, I'll change it a little bit, not as much being tired, because unfortunately, I don't know about you, but I just get to this point where I'm just tired all the time. But that's also because I'm really old, and angry. If I do a job that is just a horrible job, and it's just, and every day is like, I don't want to, I try to find something in the day that keeps my head in the game. Like, I go, I'm going to focus on just like holding static shots today or something like that. Keep me through it. And then I will go and see some classic movie, or I'll watch it on TV, and I'll maybe go, oh, look, you know what? That's why I do this. Like, that's really cool. So I think you maybe manufacture, or you try to grab these moments where you go, oh no, I do love this. And then invariably it'll come back around, and I'll be doing some close-up of an actor who's just giving some crazy performance, and I'll actually go, I'm 3 feet away from Martin Sheen giving this soliloquy about democracy and freedom. Like, how cool is this, So I think what you do is you capitalize on those moments and you stick them in your back pocket, and then when it's raining and they're throwing mud on you and it's horrible, you go, I can get through this, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like mental health in the film industry is starting to get talked about, and it's a minefield, and everybody has their own problems, and I've definitely in the last 10 years, due to work commitments, had real mental health problems, where I went to New Orleans for 9 months. My family only came out for 7 weeks, and by the end of it I was like going crazy. And it's like, I think that somewhere in the militia you've got to try and find some sort of balance, which is impossible. And I think, without making a really long-winded point, it's like, when I was in China, and I've had quite a few of these moments in my career. It's like, you know, everybody here tonight, I'm assuming, wants to be in the camera department or be a camera operator in drama. And the best thing about being a camera operator in drama is like, in China, it was fucking crazy, and there's lights everywhere, there's SAs, there's cameras, there's trucks and stuff, and then you're sat behind the camera, and the only person on the set that gets an uninterrupted view of what is actually going to end up on the screen, whether it's on TV or whether it's on YouTube or whether it's on cinema, is you. Like, and it was with Colin Farrell, and I'm there with Colin Farrell, whose method, and he's like, sometimes he's like looking at you like that, and like on a couple of occasions I went and sat next to him, and I look back, and what he's looking at is crazy, because he's got the opposite view to you. He can see everybody. And I think that the thing that I always remind myself when I'm having tough times is, like, it really is like the best seat in the house, because nobody, and honestly, it's nobody has got the view that the camera operator has got. And that's not being big-headed. That is like,
that's what it is.
It's like the real thing. You're sat there and you are lucky enough to be looking at an actor giving a performance, and they're giving it their all, and you're giving it your all, and it's like, and you get to see exactly what's going to be printed, and it's like, and that's the enjoyment part of it for me, is like, is taking that and going, right, I really struggle when my family aren't here, or I really struggle doing these nights, but if I do this and enjoy it, then somewhere in there I'm going to try and find a balance, and that kind of is the thing that helps me. And then when I see the cut, like I said, halfway through the show we got to see an 18-minute cut of the film, and it sucked me back in.
Yep.
Like, it literally gave me, it was like somebody'd given me an energy drink, and the next day I was like, right, that is why I'm here. That's why they've got me as the camera operator, because they want me to do those shots and to do those things. And it's like, and I am exhausted, and I am missing my family, and I'm not eating because the food's shit, and it's like, you know, and I'm not sleeping, and at the weekend we're going to bed at 6 a.m. and it's like all of those things. It's like, am I going to get sick? Everyone's got, you know, people have got COVID, all down the line. And then I think that's, and I think that's the same. I think that's the same if you work in television as well. Like, you know, it's no different. It's like,
it's worse.
I've been there's somebody at the back that I worked with at the beginning of my career, and we went all over the world together. And it's like, and I still think about those sunsets. I still think about, like, being up in the mountains, filming those sunsets and sunrises. And it's like, that is the joy of being behind the camera, is that you're capturing those. And I think that's why photographers go to war and film and photograph war. It's like, not because they're like enjoy being at war, but it's like they see the importance in what they're doing. And it's like, and I think that's the great thing about being behind the camera. And it's like, hopefully somewhere there it dials down the mental health problems, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and you have dark days and you have good days.
But I think it's one of those things that to do this, if you don't love it, you're probably not going to do it well, because it's too hard. It really is. So I asked Danny this on the podcast, and this shows you what an amazing operator he is, because we talked and I was impressed and this and that and the other. And then I thought of something and I asked him a question, and I said, wait, you did All Quiet on the Western Front? And he said, yeah. And I said, and it's in German? And he said, yeah. And I said, do you speak German? And you said, no.
No.
And I said, so you were literally just basing those movements off of the actions of these guys and words that you were not necessarily understanding, and there's no way you could do it off of cues. I want you to just talk about that, because it was one, when I had that moment of understanding, because it's a beautiful film and you did incredible work in that movie, but knowing that he didn't understand the dialogue absolutely blows my mind. And to me, it's one of the most impressive bits of operating I've ever seen, and I was kind of blown away by that. So I want you to talk about that for a minute.
I would say the thing that I thought that was funny was when he was talking about the West Wing, and he said about the long tracking shot and the notes on his arm, and this is my way, so it's not the right way, so don't start following. But I don't listen to what the actors talk about at all. I don't listen to the dialogue. I never have done. I don't wear cans. don't wear headphones to listen to the actors. I just base all of my operating off of watching the movement in the actors. So if I'd have been doing that West Wing shot, which I'm really glad I didn't do, because it would have been exhausting, I do everything based on watching their body language, and it was the same when I did All Quiet. There are cue words that I might listen to thinking I know that something's going to happen, but as a general rule I kind of try and just watch the emotion of the actors, and I can be operating not in the room, and I'll just watch the screen. And I feel like actors, it's kind of like poker. Actors have always got tells, and you know when they're going to do something, you know when they're going to move, because they always give something away. So it's quite easy to kind of pick up on that, I find. It seems is the direct opposite to what Dave's talking about, where he follows what they're saying. I just don't feel that it's never really worked for me like that. I always kind of go down the emotional, because I'm an emotional person. I find I go down the emotional side of it more than the dialogue side of it. Any more questions, or should we? Oh, go on.
Do you think technology, the difference between shooting on film as opposed to digital camera stuff, has it changed how long you work? I mean, the digital camera you can shoot 10 takes, not using film. Has that affected the industry over time?
Want to take that?
Has digital cameras changed the film industry from not filming on film and filming on digital time, how long you can do things? I think the honest answer is there's really good examples of where it works really well, and there's really bad examples of where it works really bad. I've done 2 films on 35mm, and that's it. Everything else I've done on digital, not through choice. And so when you step onto set, everybody talks about this massive dialogue about the olden days where they did it better with film. And I think, yeah, but there's been some amazing films made on digital post those golden days. And the reality is, it's like anything. I think I always quote like the Industrial Revolution. It's like life moves on, and it's like, yeah, film is beautiful and it's so romantic. There's no doubt about it. And if I could, I would shoot every film on film, just because it's a nice thing to do. But nobody wants to shoot on film in the UK, apart from people that have got a lot of money. And so it's just digital all the way. And even though film has this massive comeback, I think last year every Oscar-nominated film in cinematography was shot on film, wasn't it? For the first time in a long time.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I think it was.
Okay.
And I think Dave's probably better place to tell you about the days shooting on film, because I never did. I've done 2 films, sadly.
Ouch.
I know. I wish it was more.
Back in the day when we used to shoot film. What I will say, I'll answer it in 2 ways. I don't really care what is recording the image, because I can give film to a person who doesn't know how to tell a story, and it's not going to work, and I can give digital to a person and it's not going to work. Look at the movie Pi that Matty Libatique and Darren Aronofsky did. It's shot on 16mm reversal. It's unbelievable because it's an incredible story. But what I will say is this: it has destroyed, and I do mean that specifically, the way that we make movies. And the reason is because in the past, and still the present to some extent, when you were rolling film, something important was happening. You were expending film. There was only so much film you could use. There was money. You could call it whatever you want. But when I made the jump to digital, when we made the jump to digital, I had a problem at first that my shots, I just was like, I hate everything I do. And I couldn't figure it out. And what I realized was, when I used to rehearse, Steadicam rehearsals, you give like 60%. You're like, I'm gonna be over here. You're sort of figuring it out, but you're not like nailing it. And then when the film would start to turn and the post would vibrate, I didn't realize it until it was gone, but something important was happening. And it was the same thing when it was next to my head. And I had to mentally manufacture like, oh no, this is the take. Like, I have to do this. And I think also it's why when we rolled film, everybody was quiet on the set. It's why, and now everybody's like, look, we'll just keep the cameras rolling. We'll just go. And I think it has destroyed some of the process. Now that's not the fault of digital. You can still make a perfectly great film with digital, but I think the process has suffered some, and it's not for the better. I also have a really big pet peeve on this. Let's just shoot the rehearsal. Maybe magic will happen. And it's like, first of all, magic doesn't happen. I'm good at my job. You're good at your job. The actor. But like, let us figure it out so we can. And then you shoot the rehearsal. Like, well, that didn't work. And it's like, yeah, because we haven't figured the shot out yet. But on film we never did that because you figured things out and whatever. And I know I'm being nostalgic and old school and whatever, but I think we lost something there, which is frustrating to me. And I've talked to actors also who were like, there was something different about shooting on film that just. But that said, look, there are great movies every year that are shot on digital, and it's not because they're shot on digital, it's because people are just, using. And camera-wise, my assistants know this, I have zero idea what any of those buttons do. And they lock them before they hand it to me, because if they hand it to me in a car, 2 minutes later I'm going, it's in Chinese now and it's upside down. I don't know. And they're like, well, push the return. I'm like, which button do you push? They know I have, and I don't care. I have zero interest in any of that because to me, it's a box that looks at a picture, and that picture I'm using to tell stories. And that's the end of this. It doesn't make a difference what's behind that thing.
I did do, I've got a funny anecdote about, I did a Bollywood movie and they don't waste any film at all. And obviously the protocol over here is turnover, put the board on, set, Danny, are you set, action. And in Bollywood movies, they just go, action, and the focus puller turns over. And I was like, and I wasn't even ready. And like the actor's acting, and I'm like, I haven't even panned. And I'm like, what's happened? Like, and they were like, oh no, you were meant to pan then. I was like, yeah, I know, but you didn't, And then I just couldn't get my head around it because they were like, action. And so I was going to just one thing. Any of the students that are here, have you got a question?
Yeah, please.
Rather than go on.
What's like the best thing that, say you talk about improvement with those plans, say you have to work with somebody, what's one thing that person can do to make the collaboration?
So the question is, if you do end up having to work with somebody new, what is the best thing that they can do to kind of make that collaboration easier? I think that being the camera operator, you have probably got the responsibility to ease anybody. If we're just talking about the camera and grip department, which are kind of like your direct peers, as the camera operator, you've probably, especially if you're on a camera, you have probably got the responsibility to try and gel people and gel them into, not like mold them for your own devices, but to kind of help them to get in with the team and to kind of help, I especially with trainees or whatever, it's like I always go out of my way to kind of give them my time, which quite often isn't very much when you're on set because you don't leave the monitor. But I think whenever you're trying to fold, whenever anyone is trying to fold themselves into the mix, I personally am quite aware of that, because I remember early doors feeling like a real outsider and standing there like shuffling my feet, and I always think back to that time and how much that I didn't enjoy it, and so I kind of go out my way. And I think that's kind of another, like when Dave's saying about 10% of it is actually panning and tilting the camera, that's another thing you fit into the melee of trying to get people to fit into your department and get everybody getting on. I just don't like people being rude to each other. I had an incident on Star Wars where I went up and took two people aside and was like, I don't care what's going on, you either sort it out, otherwise I'm just going to get rid of you. Because it's like, I don't want to be on a set where two people don't get on and they're shouting at each other. It's not nice for the actors see it, the director sees it, and it's not how we run the camera department. So you either sort it out and become friends, or I'll just get rid of you both. It's up to you. I'll leave the ball in your court. And ultimately, we've talked about it loads, you just got to be nice to each other. And that's the great thing about the film industry, is it just spits out the people that aren't nice, and they do get spat out. Not for doing bad things, for just not getting on with people and being rude. It's like, politics all the way. Not just filming it, it's politics all the way. It's got to be nice to people. Like it's the reality, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming, are you asking from the point of view of the person who's coming in new? Okay, so the person who's coming in new, I know this is going to seem really odd, but I would say baked goods. If you can bring in homemade chocolate chip cookies to people, people are going to go, I don't even know if you know what you're doing, but I really like these cookies, bring them. I sort of am kidding and I'm sort of not kidding. And I, by the way, will bake stuff and bring it to my crew because they remember that stuff. But I think, yeah, be nice. If you're coming in as an intern, by the way, which some of you might be, if you're interested in operating or interested in, first of all, show that you're interested, but be smart about when you do it. You know, if I'm in the middle of some huge crane shot, don't come tap me on the shoulder and go, hey, I got a question. You know, but that said, maybe, you know, introduce yourself, be nice, be listening, be attentive, you know, how can I help, that kind of thing. Sometimes you're just standing by, but there's nothing wrong with when you know everything is quiet, maybe even at lunch, and you go, hey, I know you're crazed and I don't want to take too much of your time, but I'd love to talk to you about Steadicam operating or operating. Is there some time when I probably know 2 people who might not handle that well, but everybody else would handle it well. Don't ask those 2 people. But most people want to help and it's mainly just, and know that if you do come up and they go, I can't talk right now, it's probably because something is going on that you've walked in. Oh, I'm sorry. And then you come up later and you go, I apologize. It was probably a bad time. I'm really sorry. But so most of us are always happy to help everybody. And I think mainly, and especially if you're coming in as an intern, I think one of the big mistakes that interns make, interns, I would call them interns, but you know, camera PAs, whatever you want to call them, is thinking that they have to know everything. And not being willing to say, I'm so sorry, I don't know what that is, but if you just explain it to me, I'll do it, you know, or whatever. Because the worst thing in the world is to go, hey, go get the 25 off the truck, and you're like, and you leave, and then you go, I don't even know what he's talking about. And they meant to say the 25 millimeter or whatever, you know. Say, I'm sorry, I just wanted to know, you know. And they may get frustrated with you, but that's sometimes life. But I think be nice to people, and what I will say is this, and I would imagine you're the same way. We've talked about this. At the end of the day, if I need to hire someone or give the name of an intern to another show, hey, do you know a good intern or whatever? I'm going to give the name of the person that I want to be around for 16 hours a day. I'm not going to give the name of the person who drives me nuts 16 hours a day. And that thing that I told you about the guy who didn't want to bring the coffee, the other intern was this young woman who surgically knew when was the right time to ask a question and always wanted to ask questions but held back and always asked the right question and would quietly listen. And she was constantly, by the second day, she knew what type of tea the director liked. She knew what type of coffee I liked. And she would walk up after lunch and go, hey, you ready for a coffee? And I'd be like, no, I'm cool. And then she'd come back an hour later and go, can I get you? Yeah, great. Immediately, she's important to me, right? So you figure out these little ways to make yourself important, and yeah, but be nice.
The other thing I'd say is rule number 1: don't ever be late.
Yeah.
Like, don't ever be late. And there are so many examples where I haven't brought people back because they're late. Like, it's just don't ever be late.
Or at least don't be later than I am.
Yeah. But it's like, even, you know, even like in my day-to-day family life, I'm always early. Like, I can't, it's because I've been doing it for so long in my career, I can't break that model. And it's like, don't ever be, you know, and trainees cannot get this through their head. But if you have to be on set at say 7:30, get there for 7. So you always build in that buffer time. And on almost always on films, I give myself an hour. I have an hour buffer. So if my call time is 8, I am there at 7. I'm always on set at 7:30. Even if I'm not needed, I will sit there and I will listen. And sometimes the director's there, sometimes the DOP's there, sometimes they're not even there, but the art department is. And I've just told you they're like my closest friends. And I will go and hang out with them and talk to them about stuff because I know what's going on. And it's like that time management thing, when you start in the industry, is the number one, apart from being nice, is the number one thing. It's like be on time and be early. Always be early. Don't ever be late.
And I'm going to do a shameless plug for my podcast here, because the last question I ask every guest is, what piece of information, advice would you give to someone starting out in the business now? So listen to every episode and go to the end. And then the other one that I would specifically say is, the second or third one I did was with a young woman named Rochelle Brown. She started out as a camera PA. She lucked onto, I think, a commercial, and the DP was Bob Richardson, who is a very tough individual. And they kind of fed her to the wolves and were like, you go take care of Bob. And within a day, she knew what he liked to eat, she knew his coffee, she was dealing with his cases, and she stayed with them for 2 years because they were like, Bob's happy with you, you're with us, we're bringing you on everything. And she now is a Steadicam operator, and she just shot her first short, and she calls Bob Richardson up and said, will you sit and watch with me and give me your ideas? And he's like, of course, yeah. So, and she talks about how, yeah, I want to be an operator someday, but I'm a PA right now, and I'm going to be the best PA I can. It's worth listening to. It's gold.
Yeah, I worked with a trainee last year who I loved, and because we never stopped, she cut my chicken every day, which has now become like a joke. And I said to her, when you get your first film as an operator, I'll come and cut your chicken for you, because she was so good.
I love that.
She was
That's
so
fantastic.
cool. So one more question, and then I think we're
Yeah.
done. Go on.
What have you seen lately that is good, and what are you watching now?
That's a horrible question to ask.
Oh, well, so the question is, what have you seen lately, and what are you watching now?
Anything like that?
I mean, obviously, the biggest thing for me this year was June 2. I think it's like...
Was what?
June.
June?
Yeah. Greg Fraser's film.
I didn't see it.
You haven't seen it yet?
It's joking.
No. I think for me, it's like...
Oh, Dune. I thought you said June. You people talk
June.
funny.
Sand
Okay,
Dune.
June. Okay, Dune 2. I actually have not seen Dune 2, but I know what
I
it
think
is.
for me, that's like...
I heard it's amazing.
Seminal, like... I mean, it doesn't need any kind of introductions. Apart from that, it's a good question, but I can't think of anything right now.
This is probably not what you're expecting, but I just did a commercial in Chicago for a couple weeks with Bill Pope, who I mentioned earlier. In Chicago, they have a place called the Music Box Theater where they show revivals and stuff, and they had a new 70mm print of The Searchers, and we went to see that along with a bunch of other people, and it was just so cool to see a movie with huge vistas. You know, it's not what you probably expect, but it was just like. And it's John Wayne, and he's overacting and all that stuff, but it's just like Monument Valley, and it's one of those things where you're like, this is like why I got into the movies. I mean, you know, it's that big stuff. And I just rewatched Aliens, and
oh yeah,
I mean, I just was like, you got to be kidding me, like Aliens. And again,
Alien or Aliens?
Aliens is what I watched,
Right.
but Alien. But shameless plug again. If you go to the website, theop.io, there's a visuals and then the images I think it's called, and I have a thing up there of these still images that I've collected over the years and still collect from movies that I just think are like, they just tell a story. And so every once in a while I'll just go in there and I'll bop around and I'll go, you know, I haven't seen The Matrix in a while. I love The Matrix. I don't care what anybody thinks. And I'll watch The Matrix and I'll just get jazzed again about something. And so yeah. And I tend to, I mean, this goes a little far afield, but I tend to try to go to art museums just to get inspiration and like look at Renaissance paintings and try to question why they put, you know, Jesus where they put him or whatever, the light and this and that and the other.
Okay, everyone, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. We'll be back soon with another great episode. Don't forget to check us out on theop.io for all sorts of information on operating and storytelling. So thanks for listening and have a great day.